As I continue to watch our SwitchUp family grow, and thank you all so much for subscribing recently, it's been making me think a little bit about my childhood and when I've played my first games and watching my older brothers play games like Beneath a Steel Sky, others on the Commodore 64, and even the ZX Spectrum. For those of you that don't know what that was, it was a console where you had to put tape cassettes in and watch for 10 minutes while it loaded. I kid you not, but Dizzy was awesome. So on to the review today. The Way Remastered was originally released as The Way on Steam sometime last year. It received a mixed reception, with some feeling that the original's checkpoint system was far too punishing. From what I've seen so far, this has been ironed out in the remaster, and the gameplay is all the better for it. Taking on the role of Tom, after the tragic death of his wife, he cannot accept her departure, and thus your journey begins, in the graveyard in the pouring rain, with a shovel, staring down at the grave of your recently deceased wife. But is this a story of redemption and renewal, or should this one just stay dead? Let's find out. The music in The Way Remastered is exceptional. In every sense of the word, I was totally blown away by the first 5 minutes alone. The storytelling through atmospheric music is incredible. I knew instantly of the heartache the main character was feeling, how torn he was. He has no choice, and the music and sound make this abundantly clear. I'm not too proud to admit that in the opening section, it made me feel seriously emotional. The short snippets of spoken dialogue are perfect fits for the visuals and audio.
He'll be okay.
Influences are taken from the early 90s hits of yesteryear, Another World, Heart of Darkness and Flashback. While we remember these games with the rose-tinted spectacles of nostalgia, they had their own issues, particularly in the audio department, where the sound fidelity we have today was the stuff of magical dreams from the past. I guess this was where a choice was made by the developer. Do they try and mimic the sound palette of retro games while improving the musical score, or do they just improve both? Now, they chose the former here, and the sound effects are definitely weaker for it.
Lucky hit.
Many of them sounding a little empty and lifeless. This was a shame, bearing in mind the music was just so well produced. HD Rumble needs to be mentioned. This is as good as it gets. Every sound, action or motion is linked to the HD Rumble, and it really makes a difference to the visual storytelling. Really well done here. For me overall, sound and music scores 16 out of 20. I love the art style of The Way Remastered. The beginning scenes in particular carry a splendid amount of atmosphere. The overall presentation is similar to the game Beneath a Steel Sky in terms of the colour palette, while more akin to Another World in delivery. The character animations are suitably retro in style, which is to say a little bit clunky, but they're serviceable. The protagonist Tom manages to get his hands on the world's lamest gun ever early on. No, seriously. It fires a pathetically slow round that looks pretty poor in comparison to the world it inhabits. Some of the enemies later in the game are poor as well, with very limited animations. Fortunately though, I have played the classic games of old and experienced some of the most ridiculous cretins in games, so for me they were more a reference than a flat out mistake. Backdrops and vistas are where this game excels. Much of my first 15 minutes of the game I was marvelling at the level of detail achieved with the retro styling. Lighting was particularly well captured, with often stark contrasts made between the environments to keep them visually engaging. Cutting to the chase, I loved the visual style of the backdrops. The animations aren't the best, and some of the enemies look like something you might find on the bottom of your shoe after a day's walk in the countryside. Graphics for me, score 15 out of 20. The story of Tom is a tragic one. As mentioned, your wife has died, and after a less than heartfelt apology email from your work, you decide to take matters into your own hands, digging up her body and throwing her lifeless corpse into some sort of incubation chamber. I'm guessing Tom isn't some twisted necrophilia-crazed monster, but rather plans on reanimating the dead in a less Frankenstein and a more, frankly, odd sense. Regardless, this is how your adventure begins, and the many planets and locations you will visit are well worth your precious time. The story is enjoyable and engaging, and I felt for Tom. His voice acting, while a little bit stiff,
You're ready to go.
worked well and was convincing enough to create a desperation within the main character, which drives the narrative forward. For me, I don't want to spoil too much, but story gets a decent 16 out of 20. Gameplay is very familiar. The left stick controls your movement while the A, B, X and Y buttons are used for interaction and navigation. Often a direction on the left stick is used to interact with doors, for example by pressing up to enter. The right stick is used to aim the pistol, which has a laser sight and can be fired with the press of a trigger. You can jump with the press of an A button and crawl by holding down on the left stick and angling it. But this was a little bit hit and miss, and the animation here is just plain bad. Much of the gameplay revolves around puzzle solving, your initial conundrum being to break into the facility Tom works in, steal a ship and escape with your wife's body. I was really invested in the character and wanted to help him do this. It drew my attention to the amount of games with a poor story that are negatively impacted as a result. The Way Remastered does an excellent job of thrusting you into a situation where you can't help but be invested in the character and as a result the situation he finds himself in. Puzzles are logical and never demand much lateral thinking, although later in the game they certainly become trickier. What was nice and clearly a change from the original release was how the save system works. I rarely went more than a screen back when I died, so frustration was limited to my, albeit poor, ability to shoot a gun and dodge a pink plant monster. For me, gameplay and controls get 16 out of 20. On to value. At release, the game's going to retail for £10.79, I think it's on offer, and also $11.99. Now for me this represents excellent value when you consider that a cinema ticket here in the UK is going to cost you somewhere in the region of £11. The game isn't the longest, but with the additions of this version, which are voiceovers, graphical improvements, amazing HD rumble which I mentioned, there's a music player from the options menu where you can just listen to all the beautiful music in the game, and there's game and level design changes based on the feedback they received when they released the game a year ago. So overall the value is very good here, and I would recommend you pick this one up if you're a fan like I am of adventure games or even classic adventure games of old. This one's going to be an enjoyable experience for most people, and for me value gets 17 out of 20, which all adds up to give the Way Remastered a well-deserved score of 80%. This is definitely an essential pickup at launch, with the offer price being made available. As always guys, thank you so much for listening to our reviews. It's been an amazing couple of days for the channel. If you enjoyed the content, please leave a comment down below, hit that like button, and we will see you guys all on the next one. Cheers guys, switch up.